there, I'm Toby Koffman. I'm a geochemist and paleoclimatologist, and what I do at Montana State University is manage the Environmental Analytical Lab. And we do chemistry testing on soils and waters. We can test for nutrients, macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, micronutrients, and things like heavy metals. And all of these measurements can be helpful for detecting groundwater and surface water contamination, tracking changes in water quality through time, monitoring the success of remediation efforts. And in 2020, I was very lucky to have Tennison Big Day join my crew in the lab. I usually have 2 or 3 undergraduate assistants and several grad students who are working on their samples in the lab. We handle a few thousand samples per year. We have half a dozen different analytical instruments to measure nutrients and major elements in soils and waters. Tennison came to us with quite a bit of experience in paleoecology labs, and the more experience we can get in our assistants, the easier it is to keep the lab running smoothly. And so aside from his lab experience, Tennison has really great hands-on environmental science background, being out in the field on the land, and he has a deep reverence for the land that when he brings that to the lab, it gives me great confidence that any of the work he's going to do is going to be the highest quality and attention to detail work that can happen in the lab. So I've been really grateful to have the opportunity to work with Tennison for a couple years in the lab, and I think he'll do great things wherever he goes. Helped me with a lot is this ICP OES. I'll say a little bit about the instrument, and I'll talk about what Tennison did there in the lab to help me with it. ICP OES stands for inductively coupled plasma. So this part in here is the plasma torch. And when it's running, argon gas comes through, and this coil has a strong electrical current that energizes the plasma, just like a plasma cutter, makes a super hot flame, hot like the surface of the sun. And all of this other plumbing, tiny plastic plumbing, is coming from this auto sampler. And the auto sampler just has a pump that sucks up the sample and sends it into that plasma. And then there's a super fancy camera that scans all of the light that's emitted by all of the elements in these samples. And we can tell how much calcium, magnesium, sodium, trace metals, heavy metals if there's a lot of them, what's in the water that is an element of interest. So it can handle a pretty wide range of concentrations, this ICP-OES, but a lot of times water will have too much of certain elements, really abundant ones like calcium and sodium. And so we dilute those samples so that we can measure them in a range where the calibration standards have a linear response to concentration. They produce the same amount of same additional increment of light for this proportional increase in concentration. So Tennison did a lot of work diluting those, helping me keep this thing running. And it's one of our key instruments in the lab.
Right.
So this ICP-OES is an argon hog. If you ever do any welding, you think you use a lot of argon. This uses a lot of argon. One of these $60 tanks of ultra-high purity argon is gone in 5 hours. And I'm lucky if I can measure 50 samples, 50 unknowns, along with all the calibration standards. It takes half an hour to warm up so that it's stable. So what I'm doing here is just putting a couple of compression fittings onto a T with some little ball valves so that I can swap out tanks. Have at least 2 on there and run for 10 hours, but if I really want to, I can run longer by swapping out tanks, or I can run a partial tank. If I get one that's getting low, I can shut a valve off, put in another tank. Regulators, in the argon, and then a double check, because this has a upper and lower spec for the argon pressure. That might be a little high. It wants no more than 8 bar, 8 atmospheres, which is right around 116 or 17. A little bit more. This is saying 7.83. I like to run it at like 7.5. So I had them up to test. I do have a tiny leak. It's just making this little foam and grasshopper spit, but it's not really fast enough to matter. This thing goes through the argon so fast. I'll try and tighten it up another time. This is our inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer. I am looking at the plasma torch there through some welding glass. It's bright blue like a welding torch or the surface of the sun, hotter maybe than the surface of the sun. So when the sample gets sucked up by this auto sampler and pumped in there, there's a little nebulizer makes fine mist. The mist particles go right through that plasma torch, and any molecules get blasted apart into atoms, and the atoms get energized by all that plasma energy, and then they zoom into the camera, they cool off and emit light at characteristic wavelengths, so you can tell what elements are in your sample.
Hello, my name is Tennison Big Day, and I am from the Apsàalooke Reservation here in Montana. Right now, I am Montana State University in Dr. Tobias Koffman's lab in Leon Johnson, working with water dilution samples.